My wife claimed she was infertile. She's been taking birth control pills for 3 years. There are few things more sacred in a marriage than the shared dream of starting a family together. When couples face fertility challenges, it becomes a journey that requires trust, support, and absolute honesty about medical realities that affect both partners' futures. What I'm about to share with you is a story that will shake you to your core because it involves the most fundamental deception possible, lying about the ability to create life together. Hit that subscribe button right now because this story will make you question everything you think you know about medical honesty in marriage and the lengths some people will go to control their partner's dreams and timeline. The decision to have children is one of the most important choices a married couple can make together. It requires planning, preparation, and often involves medical consultations, fertility tracking, and sometimes invasive procedures when conception doesn't happen naturally. When one partner faces fertility challenges, it becomes a shared burden that couples work through together, supporting each other through disappointment, hope, and the emotional roller coaster of trying to create new life. But what happens when those fertility challenges aren't real? What happens when your spouse has been lying about a fundamental medical condition while secretly preventing the family you've been desperately trying to create? My name is James, and until 2 months ago, I believe my wife Michelle was courageously dealing with fertility issues that were preventing us from having the children we both desperately wanted. I thought her inability to conceive after 3 years of trying was a medical challenge we were facing together, something that required patience, understanding, and unwavering support as we explored different treatment options. I had no idea that when Michelle told me she was infertile and couldn't get pregnant naturally, she was lying to cover up the fact that she had been secretly taking birth control pills for 3 years, deliberately preventing the pregnancy we had been trying so hard to achieve. I'm 32 years old, a high school science teacher from Phoenix, Arizona, and I've been married to Michelle for 5 years. We spent the first 2 years of our marriage enjoying our time as a couple, traveling, building our careers, and preparing for the family we planned to start when we felt financially and emotionally ready. Michelle works as a marketing coordinator for a healthcare company, and together we felt confident that we could provide a stable, loving home for children. 3 years ago, we made the exciting decision to start trying for our first child. We were both thrilled about the prospect of becoming parents and approached family planning with the same careful consideration we had applied to other major life decisions. Michelle stopped her previous birth control method. We began tracking her ovulation cycle, and we started the hopeful process of trying to conceive our first baby. I can't wait to see you as a father, Michelle would tell me during those early months of trying to get pregnant. You're going to be amazing with kids, and I think we'll make beautiful babies together. I was equally excited about the prospect of starting our family and looked forward to the day when we would get that positive pregnancy test that would change our lives forever. For the first year of trying to conceive, we approached the process with optimism and patience, understanding that it can take time for healthy couples to get pregnant. We maintained healthy lifestyles, took prenatal vitamins, and tried to keep the process fun and romantic rather than clinical and stressful. These things take time, Michelle would say when I occasionally expressed concern about not getting pregnant immediately. We're both young and healthy, so I'm sure it will happen when the timing is right. Michelle's calm, patient attitude about our conception timeline helped keep me from becoming too anxious about the process, and I trusted her instincts about when we might need to seek medical help. By our second year of trying to conceive, however, I started to feel concerned that we hadn't achieved pregnancy despite consistent efforts and careful timing. I suggested that we might want to consult with Michelle's gynecologist to make sure everything was functioning normally and to explore whether there were any underlying issues affecting our ability to conceive. I think we should give it a little more time before involving doctors, Michelle said when I brought up the possibility of fertility testing. Medical interventions can be stressful and expensive, and I'd rather try naturally for a while longer. Michelle's reluctance to seek medical help seemed understandable, since fertility treatments can indeed be emotionally and financially demanding, and many couples prefer to try conceiving naturally for extended periods before pursuing medical assistance. However, as our third year of trying to conceive began, I became more insistent that we needed professional medical evaluation to understand why we weren't getting pregnant. Michelle, I said during one of our conversations about family planning, it's been 2 years since we started trying to get pregnant. I think we need to find out if there's a medical reason why we haven't conceived yet. Michelle seemed uncomfortable with my suggestion, but eventually agreed that we should schedule appointments with her gynecologist to begin begin fertility testing. You're right, she said. If there's something preventing us from getting pregnant, we should find out what it is so we can address it. I was relieved that Michelle was finally willing to seek medical help, and I looked forward to getting answers that might help us achieve our dream of starting a family. Michelle scheduled an appointment with her gynecologist, and I arranged to have my own fertility tested to ensure that we were evaluating both potential causes of our conception challenges. My fertility tests came back completely normal, showing healthy sperm count, motility, and overall reproductive function. The doctor assured me that there were no male factors preventing us from conceiving naturally. When Michelle returned from her gynecological appointment, however, she delivered devastating news about her fertility status. "James," she said, sitting down next to me on our couch with tears in her eyes. "The doctor found some problems with my reproductive system. She says that I have issues with my ovaries and fallopian tubes that make it very difficult or maybe impossible for me to get pregnant naturally." Michelle explained that her gynecologist had identified structural problems and hormonal imbalances that severely compromised her ability to conceive and carry a pregnancy to term. The doctor says that even with fertility treatments, my chances of getting pregnant are very low. Michelle continued through her tears. She recommended that we consider adoption or other alternatives if we really want to have children. I was heartbroken by Michelle's diagnosis, but I immediately assured her that we would face this challenge together and explore every possible option for building our family. "We'll figure this out," I told her, holding her as she cried. "There are lots of ways to become parents, and we'll find the path that works for us. Your medical condition doesn't change how much I love you or how committed I am to building a family with you." Michelle seemed comforted by my support and determination to find alternative ways to have children despite her fertility challenges. Over the following months, we began researching fertility treatments, adoption processes, and other family-building options. Michelle seemed hesitant about pursuing aggressive medical interventions, claiming that the procedures would be physically and emotionally difficult given her specific medical conditions. "Fertility treatments would be really hard on my body," Michelle explained when I suggested we consult with a reproductive endocrinologist. "The doctor said that my particular problems make most fertility treatments unlikely to work and potentially dangerous for me." I respected Michelle's concerns about the physical demands of fertility treatments and focused our family-building research on adoption and other alternatives that wouldn't require medical intervention. We attended adoption information sessions, consulted with adoption agencies, and began the lengthy process of preparing for domestic adoption. While adoption had never been our first choice for building our family, I was committed to becoming a parent through whatever path was available to us. "I know this isn't how we planned to have children," I told Michelle during one of our adoption preparation meetings, "but I think we could provide a wonderful home for a child who needs a family." Michelle seemed supportive of our adoption plans, though she often appeared sad and conflicted about not being able to have biological children together. The first thing that made me suspicious about Michelle's fertility story came about 6 months ago when I accidentally discovered medical information that contradicted what she had told me about her gynecological appointment. I was looking for our insurance cards in Michelle's purse to schedule a doctor's appointment for myself, and I found a prescription bottle with Michelle's name on it. The medication was a birth control pill that had been prescribed just a few weeks earlier. I was confused and concerned. If Michelle had fertility problems that prevented her from getting pregnant, why would she need birth control pills? When I asked Michelle about the birth control prescription, she seemed nervous and took several moments to respond. "Oh, that's for hormone regulation," she said. "The gynecologist prescribed birth control pills to help manage the hormonal imbalances that are part of my fertility problems." Michelle's explanation seemed medically plausible, since birth control pills are sometimes used to regulate hormones for various reproductive health conditions. However, I was surprised that Michelle hadn't mentioned this hormone treatment when she told me about her gynecological diagnosis and treatment plan. The second red flag came when I noticed that Michelle was taking the birth control pills daily, which seemed inconsistent with short-term hormone regulation therapy. I observed that Michelle had a routine of taking a pill at the same time every evening, behavior that looked exactly like someone taking birth control for contraceptive purposes rather than occasional hormone therapy. "Michelle," I asked one evening, "how long will you need to take those hormone pills? It seems like you've been taking them for several months now." Michelle seemed uncomfortable with my question and gave a vague response about needing ongoing hormone management for her reproductive health issues. "The doctor said I might need to take them for an extended period," she said. "The hormone regulation is part of managing my fertility condition." But Michelle's daily pill-taking routine and her reluctance to discuss the specific details of her hormone therapy made me increasingly suspicious about the true purpose of her medication. The third red flag came when I decided to research Michelle's supposed fertility condition and couldn't find medical information that matched her description of her diagnosis. Based on Michelle's description of structural problems with her ovaries and fallopian tubes, combined with hormonal imbalances, I expected to find clear medical information about her condition and its treatment options. However, my research into reproductive health conditions didn't reveal any diagnosis that exactly matched Michelle's description of her fertility problems that would require the type of ongoing birth control pill therapy she was receiving. The medical information I found suggested that most structural fertility problems would require surgical evaluation or specialized fertility treatments rather than simple hormone regulation with birth control pills. The situation reached a breaking point 6 weeks ago when I decided to contact Michelle's gynecologist directly to better understand her medical condition and our family planning options. I called Dr. Sandra Williams, the gynecologist Michelle claimed had diagnosed her fertility problems, and requested a consultation to discuss our situation as a couple trying to build a family despite medical challenges. Mr. Johnson, Dr. Williams said when I explained the purpose of my call, I think there might be some confusion about your wife's medical situation. Could you please have Michelle call me directly to discuss releasing her medical information to you? Dr. Williams seemed hesitant to discuss Michelle's case, which I initially attributed to patient privacy requirements. However, when I asked Dr. Williams general questions about the fertility condition that Michelle had described, the doctor's responses suggested that she wasn't familiar with the specific diagnosis Michelle had claimed to receive. The symptoms you're describing don't match any specific diagnosis I typically see, Dr. Williams said. I'd really need to review the specific medical records to understand what condition you're referring to. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. For 3 years, Michelle had been preventing the pregnancy we had been trying to achieve while allowing me to believe that medical problems were keeping us from starting our family. You've been lying to me for 3 years? I asked, barely able to process the magnitude of her deception. We've been going through fertility testing, researching adoption, and planning our lives around your supposed medical condition. None of it was real. Michelle admitted that she had never wanted to have children as soon as we had planned. She had been afraid to tell me directly because she knew how important starting a family was to me. I thought I could buy myself some time to figure out my feelings about having children, Michelle confessed. I knew you wanted kids right away, but I wasn't ready, so I decided to prevent pregnancy while making it seem like we were trying. Michelle's deception wasn't a momentary lie or a temporary delay. It was a systematic, calculated fraud that had affected every major decision we had made about our marriage and our future for 3 years. Michelle, I said, trying to understand the full scope of her betrayal. You let me go through fertility testing. You researched adoption agencies with me. You let me believe that we were facing a medical challenge together when you were deliberately preventing the pregnancy we supposedly both wanted. Michelle tried to minimize her deception by claiming that she had been planning to tell me the truth once she felt ready to start trying for real pregnancy. I was going to stop taking the birth control pills eventually, she said. I just needed more time to prepare myself for parenthood. But Michelle's explanation didn't account for the elaborate lies she had maintained, medical appointments she had fabricated, or the emotional trauma she had caused by allowing me to believe we were dealing with infertility. If you're feeling as betrayed and devastated as I was when I learned that Michelle had been lying about fertility problems for 3 years, you need to hit that subscribe button right now, because this story gets even more shocking when I discovered what she had been planning for our future. What I found out about her real timeline for having children and her backup plans will make you realize that some deceptions are so calculated and cruel that they destroy not just trust, but the very foundation of what marriage is supposed to represent. Ring that notification bell, because you won't believe how this reproductive betrayal affected every aspect of our relationship. Over the next several days, Michelle revealed additional details about her deception that made the situation even more heartbreaking and infuriating. Michelle admitted that she had been researching and planning her fertility lies for months before implementing them, including studying medical information to make her false diagnosis sound convincing. I spent weeks reading about fertility problems online so I would know what to tell you, Michelle confessed. I wanted to make sure my story sounded medically accurate so you wouldn't question it. Michelle had been deliberately studying reproductive health conditions to construct a believable lie that would allow her to prevent pregnancy while maintaining my trust and support. Michelle also revealed that she had never actually seen Dr. Williams for fertility testing, but had instead used a routine gynecological appointment to create the cover story for her supposed diagnosis. I had a normal annual checkup with Dr. Williams, Michelle admitted, but I used that appointment to claim that she had found fertility problems. I made up all the details about the diagnosis and treatment recommendations. Michelle had been using routine medical care as the foundation for elaborate lies about reproductive health problems that didn't exist. The most devastating revelation revelation was that Michelle had been planning to continue her deception indefinitely, with no timeline for actually trying to get pregnant. I didn't have a specific plan for when I would stop preventing pregnancy, Michelle admitted when I pressed her about her long-term intentions. I was hoping that maybe you would get tired of trying to have children and we could just focus on our careers and travel instead. Michelle had been hoping that her deception would eventually change my mind about wanting children, allowing her to avoid parenthood permanently while maintaining our marriage based on lies. Michelle also admitted that she had been prepared to pursue fake fertility treatments if necessary to maintain her deception, including potentially undergoing unnecessary medical procedures to support her false infertility claims. If you had insisted on more aggressive fertility treatments, Michelle said, I was prepared to go through some of the procedures to make it look like I was really trying to get pregnant. Michelle had been willing to undergo unnecessary medical interventions and expose herself to potential health risks in order to maintain her lies about fertility problems. When I asked Michelle why she had married me knowing that I wanted children and that starting a family was important to my vision of our future together, she admitted that she had hoped she could change my priorities over time. I thought that maybe after a few years of marriage, having children would become less important to you, Michelle said. I was hoping that our relationship would be enough and that you would decide you didn't really need to be a father. Michelle had entered our marriage with the deliberate intention of deceiving me about one of my most important life goals, gambling that she could manipulate my desires and expectations over time. The investigation into Michelle's deception also revealed that she had been lying to her friends and family about our supposed fertility struggles, accepting sympathy and support based on fabricated medical problems. Michelle has been telling everyone that we're dealing with infertility. I discovered when I spoke with her sister about the situation. She's been getting so much emotional support from people who thought she was going through a medical crisis. Michelle had been exploiting the compassion and concern of our friends and family members by pretending to suffer from reproductive health problems that would naturally generate sympathy and understanding. I also learned that Michelle had been actively discouraging friends and family from asking detailed questions about her fertility treatments or medical care, claiming that the topic was too emotionally difficult for her to discuss. Michelle always seemed so sad when anyone brought up her fertility problems, her best friend told me. We all tried to be supportive without pushing for details because we thought it was too painful for her to talk about. Michelle had been using people's natural sensitivity about fertility issues to prevent anyone from asking questions that might expose her lies. When I demanded that Michelle explain why she thought it was acceptable to base our marriage on such fundamental deception, she initially tried to claim that she had been protecting my feelings by avoiding conflict about our different timelines for having children. I didn't want to hurt you by telling you I wasn't ready to have kids, Michelle said. I thought it would be easier to delay pregnancy in a way that wouldn't make you feel rejected or unloved. But Michelle's explanation ignored the fact that her deception had caused much more pain and damage than honest communication about her concerns would have caused. Michelle, I said, lying to me about fertility problems for 3 years wasn't protecting my feelings. It was stealing 3 years of my life and my opportunity to make informed decisions about our marriage and my future. Michelle's deception had prevented me from understanding her true feelings about parenthood and had denied me the opportunity to decide whether I wanted to remain in a marriage with someone who didn't share my goals for building a family. I told Michelle that our marriage was over and that she needed to move out of our house, while I processed the magnitude of her betrayal and decided how to rebuild my life. Michelle initially tried to convince me that we could work through her deception with counseling and that she was now ready to start trying to have children for real. I realize now that I was wrong to lie to you, Michelle said, but we can start fresh now that everything is out in the open. I'm ready to try to get pregnant if you still want to have children with me. But Michelle's offer to finally try to have children couldn't undo 3 years of systematic deception or restore the trust that her lies had destroyed. Michelle, I said, you spent 3 years lying to me about one of the most important aspects of our marriage. You let me believe we were dealing with a medical crisis while you were deliberately preventing the family we supposedly both wanted. That level of deception can't be fixed by suddenly being willing to tell the truth. I filed for divorce immediately, citing Michelle's fraud and deception as irreconcilable differences that had fundamentally damaged our marriage beyond repair. The divorce proceedings were complicated by Michelle's attempts to claim that her deception had been motivated by psychological issues that deserved sympathy and treatment rather than consequences. Michelle's lawyer tried to argue that her lies about fertility were the result of anxiety and fear about parenthood. My lawyer explained. They wanted the court to view her deception as a mental health issue rather than deliberate fraud. However, the evidence of Michelle's calculated planning and systematic deception made it clear that her lies had been deliberate choices rather than the result of psychological distress. Michelle was ultimately held responsible for the emotional and financial damages caused by her deception, including the costs of unnecessary fertility testing and adoption research that we had pursued based on her false medical claims. The divorce was finalized 4 months after I discovered Michelle's deception about fertility problems. Michelle's deception had not only ended our marriage, it had also cost me 3 years of my life during which I could have been building a family with someone who actually wanted children. At 32 years old, I was starting over in terms of both my relationship status and my family-building timeline, having lost years that I could have spent with a partner who shared my goals and values. 6 months later, I've begun rebuilding my life and my confidence in my ability to recognize honesty and authenticity in relationships. I've learned painful lessons about the importance of verifying medical information and maintaining direct communication with healthcare providers about conditions that affect both partners in a marriage. I now understand that some deceptions are so fundamental that they invalidate the entire foundation of a relationship, and that forgiveness isn't always the appropriate response to systematic fraud. Michelle's betrayal taught me that shared goals and honest communication about life priorities are essential for a healthy marriage, and that someone who is willing to lie about reproductive health issues for years is not capable of the partnership that marriage requires. I'm now in a relationship with someone who values honesty about life goals and who understands that building a family requires genuine commitment from both partners. Sometimes people ask me if I blame myself for not recognizing signs of Michelle's deception earlier or for not insisting on more direct involvement in her medical care. While I could have been more vigilant about verifying medical information, Michelle is ultimately responsible for choosing to construct and maintain elaborate lies about fertility problems that affected every major decision in our marriage. Michelle made deliberate choices to prevent pregnancy while allowing me to believe we were trying to conceive, fabricate medical diagnoses that didn't exist, and to accept sympathy and support based on fake reproductive health problems. The level of planning and deception required to maintain Michelle's lies for 3 years shows that this wasn't a temporary mistake or moment of weakness. It was systematic fraud designed to control my life and expectations without my knowledge or consent. I trusted Michelle to be honest about medical issues that affected our family planning because that's what marriage requires: honesty about the fundamental aspects of building a life together. Michelle's betrayal stole 3 years of my reproductive timeline and denied me the opportunity to make informed decisions about my marriage and my future as a father. However, discovering Michelle's deception ultimately saved me from wasting more years in a marriage with someone who was fundamentally dishonest and manipulative. The pain of learning about Michelle's fertility lies was devastating, but it also freed me to find someone who genuinely wants to build a family and who values the honesty and trust that healthy relationships require. Michelle's deception taught me that reproductive honesty is non-negotiable in marriage, and that someone who is willing to lie about the ability to create life together is not suitable for the partnership that building a family requires. I now understand the difference between temporary disagreements about timing and fundamental deception about life goals, and I have the knowledge to recognize and avoid relationships based on systematic lies. The 3 years I lost to Michelle's deception were painful, but they also taught me what authentic partnership looks like and what I deserve in a marriage built on truth rather than manipulation.